Guys, how's it going? I hope you all are doing well out there, no matter where you are. A couple of things I've been thinking about as I see changes start happening around me. Um, Fall is coming. As a pagan, not that I particularly follow these things to the letter or that I am of certain kind. Some of you might know what I'm talking about. Um, it's about to be harvest. You harvest before the coming winter and prepare for the coming winter. In the past, not just for pagans, but also for Christians, it's a well known thing that if you were a farmer or that if you cultivated, you always left some of your crops out in the field for others. Some claim that it would be for passers-by to be able to pick reasonably within your crops if they do not have any of their own, to be able to sow seeds that may come from you. Some would say that it's to maintain some form of ecosystem, for the birds and for the creatures that live, around you. Uh, these days, with modern methods of farming, we don't do a lot of that stuff anymore. Some places still do. They're very traditionalist in that way. And I think that it's a great thing. And I want to be able to apply that kind of thought, not just in terms of being a Christian, but being a pagan, as well as being part of other religions that are not necessarily uh, among the West. Getting right into it, we know that especially if you're a part of modern cultures or modern cities, countries, you pay taxes. And we all know what taxes are for. I would imagine that you do, infrastructure, education, healthcare, welfare, giving on to people that cannot do for themselves, handicaps, again, all very good things, especially when done within consent and within reason. As an individual, however, it may be difficult to try to come up with how you would tackle that. It's known in the Bible, for example, Christians, even in terms of what Jesus has said, to give unto others, to give your 10% or your 15, 20%, depending on where you hail from. All of these things connect to old beliefs of sustaining each other and being one with our environment, being one with nature. So how can you apply that on a modern day perspective for a modern man as an individualist? I want to talk about what I do. I'm not expecting anyone to follow along with it or to even do it at all. It's just that as a pagan, you can choose to do these things for your own right, or you can choose not to do it at all. There is no telling what comes from it, with certainty. It's just that, many of us would believe that there's a lot of good that can come from such a system, not just in terms of giving to others, but as a greater, more, universal way of behaving towards one another. So, quick example, I come up with some money. Doesn't matter how much it is. It doesn't matter that I choose to give 10 or 20 or even 5, whatever. The idea is usually, especially for Christians, that you give to people that are much worse off than you. You give people that need it the most. It could be someone that's going through a particularly poor time in their life. It could be someone that is really in need of something at the time, whether they're in need of, food, clothing, but it does not necessarily have to be that way. It should be of note that what you're doing for yourself, what you're doing in terms of the universe and how that applies to other people doesn't necessarily be, or need to be part of your concern. The same way that you can give to a poor person, the same way that you could give to another person who's rich or not so poor, the same way that you could give to a person who chooses to live a certain life that is seen as moral or good, you can give to another person who chooses to live a life that is perhaps not so moral and not so good. In the grand scheme of things in the universe, it's all the same. We're all going in the same place anyways. So when you give, either to charity or you give, your due or your 10% or whatever you want to call it, if you want to call it anything at all, how do you go about that? I sometimes choose to give in a frivolous way. I can give in a way that it could be seen as bad because blowing a bunch of money on drugs or alcohol at a face level, you might think, wow, How exactly are you giving to others if you're blowing your money on something that you're giving to rich people or people who don't need it? Well, that's not necessarily true. If you have a local person that's making their own alcohol, for example, right? Like they're bootleggers. They're technically speaking behaving in such a way that is against the law. I wouldn't say that they're criminals. I think that they're just being rebellious. But hey, you want your booze, you go to your local, bootlegger, booze maker, moonshiner, whatever. Pay this man to make you some booze. You just gave unto someone else in such a way that brings that person up while simultaneously receiving. Like, you're literally giving to the poor. It could be the poor on a spiritual level. It could be the poor in such a way that they're just going against the established powers. Going against the established powers as individualists, I don't see how anybody else could disagree with that. I mean, I suppose there might be such a thing as individualists who also believe in the power of the government, but we're not gonna go there. Um, hey, buy some weed from your local drug dealer, especially if he's growing it himself. Find yourself, your local prostitute. Believe the shock in her face, man, if you just pull up in your car, hand over some cash and be like, hey, you're doing a great job, and just drive away. Now, some people might look down on that. I think it would be amazing. Is this kind of thing that at least I believe as for myself that we've forgotten at a certain point that you're supposed to treat the people who serve, the people who do the worst of jobs, you treat them a certain way. You can have all types of ideas about how what they do is not respectable or it's wrong or whatever, but it's not for you to judge, is it? Regardless whether or not you believe in certain religions or whatever, there's no point that I can think of, at least right now, until someone enlightens me, that it is your point to judge. Not to say that you cannot judge, because I believe that judging is just the type of thing that people do and that is normal for you to do, but to act upon that judgment as to say that someone is less of you or inferior to you in certain ways because of the servitude that they have to put themselves under, that's a whole other thing in which I imagine each individual person might have their own ideas about. Well, we can always talk about it. In the same way that we reap and we harvest, you reap what you sow, you harvest what you planted, you get back uh, what you give or you don't. It's very possible that you can give something to someone else, or you can pay your taxes or any variations thereof, that you don't get anything back from it. It just goes away, and it might make certain people feel a certain way, or most people actually. I think now that I think about it more deeply, could be upset that they do all this work. They, they break their backs and they give all this stuff away and they don't get anything back from it. It's this kind of idea that we forgot that it is our own individual responsibilities and not the responsibility of, you know, this whole or the government, for example. Don't take my word for it. Do it unto yourselves. See how differently it can be when you see it that way. It is a amazing practice, I believe. And you'd be surprised. At least I've been surprised in my own life when I was able to behave this way and how over time the things that I've experienced and the things that have come back to me was realized. Not in a karma sort of way, not in a, like if you do good that, God will bless you, but in such a way that especially if you're in a certain community that is, I guess you could say poor, that you're well established or you know yourself to be someone that is willing to help others, that you gain this mutual respect amongst your fellow men and fellow workers through, action of respect rather than just saying or talking like you respect others. So, happy harvest, everyone, when it does come. And those of you who are not part of that, bless you all and prepare for the winter.